Urbana is a catalytic event. I would say like it can catalyze your group. Or if you're a student that's listening to this, it can catalyze your peer group or your campus fellowship. So to bring a group to a catalytic event that actually in just those 4 or 5 days, I consider that like over a year's worth of discipleship.
Welcome to the Urbana Podcast. This is the show where we empower Christian leaders on college campuses with the tools and strategies to help students address the challenges facing our world and advance the gospel's reach to the ends of the earth.
Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Urbana Podcast. I'm Phoebe, one of the hosts here, and I'm joined by Mark. Mark, how are you doing on this lovely Friday?
You know, I'm doing really, really well. And I'm looking forward to the weekend, though. I deserve it. I've been on a plane almost every day this week. So,
It's been a good week when you can look at the weekend and say, I deserve it. Or maybe not a great week, but for you, it's been a good week.
It has been a great week.
It's been a full week. Yeah.
I always look forward to getting some time with my wife. So protecting my wife and protecting some Sabbath rest. Those are two things that I think are real important in the midst of all that we're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. That's really cool.
Mm-hmm. Well, today we're going to be talking with Tom Lin, who is the president and CEO of InterVarsity Christian Fellowship.
Woohoo.
And Tom has directed Urbanas in the past, and now he's leading the entire organization. You know Tom, right?
I do, yeah. I knew Tom. I know Tom quite well through InterVarsity, actually. Yeah, we've had some good conversations here and there. I mean, obviously, he's a very busy man, being the president of InterVarsity.
Yeah.
But just seeing him throughout my internship there and chatting here and there at the water cooler, he's someone who is incredibly down to earth for being such a successful person. So he's really easy to talk to.
Yeah, well, I'm excited for everybody to get to know him a little bit more and some of the things he's experienced leading Urbana and attending Urbana. It'd be interesting someday to count who's been to the most Urbanas, but he's been to a lot of them, and he's had, he's been in the seat in the as a participant, and then he's been behind the stage and scenes in a lot of them as well. So anyway, let's go to my interview with Tom Lin. Right after our interview with Tom Lin, I'm going to share with you something that's really cool. So stay tuned for after the interview. Tom, welcome to the Urbana Podcast. How are you doing today?
Doing great. Good to see you, Mark.
Oh, so good to see you. So for those of you that don't know, Tom is the CEO, president of InterVarsity USA, and he's the actual person who hired me to do this role as Urbana, and it's a job that you've done before. Tom, tell us a little bit about just your background, your history with InterVarsity, and we'll talk a little bit about Urbana and some of the things that you've seen happen over the years, because, boy, how many Urbanas have you been a part of?
Yeah, probably 15, 16.
Wow. So, multiply that by 3 and you get a little idea of how much time Tom's invested here in Urbana. So, give us a little background about your story.
Yeah, Urbana was a part of it, so I can go into that maybe a little bit later if you want, but it's part of my calling. But I came into campus ministry as a fresh college graduate with InterVarsity Christian Fellowship. So I was doing campus ministry as a young 21, 22-year-old, and have been doing campus ministry for about 30 years now. Love how strategic it is to reach college students where they're at, to share the gospel with them, develop them as leaders, disciple them, and send them out. And in many ways, God did that in my life too. So as I was ministering to college students, some of my missions journey was that my wife and I felt the Lord leading us to go to places where there was no gospel movement, and especially among young people. And so we ended up going to Mongolia in 2002, served there for a while. That's an important part of our journey. And so when we came back, I continued to serve with InterVarsity in some leadership capacities, but I think, my heart was still burdened for the world. And that's when the Lord led me to lead Urbana then for 2012. the 2012 conference and the 2015 conference. It was a lot of fun and just a joy to be able to serve that generation of college students in mobilizing them for missions. Shortly after that, I ended up taking the role of president for InterVarsity, and so my responsibility now is mainly U.S. college campuses, and mobilizing for mission is certainly one part of what we do in InterVarsity, not the only thing. But obviously, Urbana is still a key part of our ministry and a big part of how we mobilize students.
So you said that Urbana was a part of your personal kind of spiritual trajectory. What was your first Urbana year, and how did that play a role in forming who you are today?
Yeah, my Urbana was my first one was Urbana '93, and I was in the middle of discerning as a student leader who was going to graduate soon. So I was already doing ministry on campus as a student. What would the Lord have for me after I graduated? And that's the perfect posture, I believe, still today to enter into an Urbana, asking the Lord, "What would you have for me?"
And you were a
What are you
student at
calling me?
Harvard University, right?
Yeah, so I was a Harvard rising senior at the
I've heard of
time,
it.
or senior, was a senior, and trying to figure out what to do. And I was invited into this student leader track at Urbana, what we would call now Lead X, and it was instrumental because I was suddenly with thousands of other student leaders from around the country. Together, we were talking to each other, challenging each other, and discerning where God was calling us. And for me, that discernment time, I heard the Lord say, well, I first opened my posture, wherever you would have me, Lord, I will do it and I will go. And and the Lord was like, I need you to serve me here on these campuses. And so I said yes. He gave me a vision for what it would be like to serve him, and I said yes at that Urbana. We filled out a little decision card there, and I committed myself to long-term service. Now, at the time, I wasn't sure about the overseas component or kind of global component, but I knew I wanted to serve him, and so then I did. And so Urbana was a part of my own calling into ministry.
It's interesting you say you didn't know exactly what that commitment would lead to at the time. And I think a lot of people have this idea that Urbana is a place where we come and we really put the pressure on you to become a missionary. And that's not really what it's about.
Right.
It's really
Right.
about finding your place in God's global mission and where your spot is, whatever that is.
Yep.
I actually was there 3 years before you. That was my Urbana year in 1990. I was a part of that leadership track as well. And I went away saying, Lord, I'll go anywhere. And for me, that meant overseas. And then God sent me to Texas, which was a cross-cultural experience. But, we just don't know. But when we surrender our lives to the Lord, that really, all of a sudden, we become malleable to what it is that he wants to do. And can be surprising in a lot of different ways, I think.
That's right. Yeah. I think the what was the most instrumental for me, but also thousands of other students, and probably at every Urbana, is um, grasping the sense of mission. So what mission is, and that I'm called to it, and that mission field could be anywhere, literally. But having that sense of mission wherever God might send me was so key. And in my context, it ended up being first U.S. campuses, then abroad to a place where there was no gospel movement. And then in between, I had some years in the marketplace as well. Even if you're called to the marketplace, how do you make that a place of mission for you? I think Urbana really does that.
Yeah, I've talked to people who have been moved by radical generosity to, it's like, I'm not going to go anywhere. I have this gift of abundance, but I'm going to use that abundance to help people like Mark and Tom go out and do the work that they're doing, while they're also doing significant work in the fields that God's called them to. But it is neat to see the way people are connected with what God's purpose is for them in their life.
Yeah.
What are, maybe just looking over your years at Urbana, what are a couple like Urbana moments for you that just really stand out? They're like, oh, wow, this was one of those moments. It may have been a speaker, something they said, or something that happened with a student.
Yeah, I would say, well, one, I met my wife at Urbana, so I should make
Hey,
sure I say that one.
there we go. That's the only
And
thing anybody really cares about,
yeah, as you know, a lot of marriages happen. Urbana has a role in that, in those marriages, and I don't know how much we advertise that for Urbana, but it does happen. You meet your
We
future
probably should
spouse. But
lead with that more,
yeah, that's
Yeah.
right. So I did meet my wife Nancy there. We were in the student leadership track at the time, and but let's just say our first encounter was not that. I didn't make a positive impression the first time we met, but hey, it all worked out in the end. Um, I remember distinctly one of the speakers in the 90s when I was a student, Lindsey Brown. Lindsey
Mm-hmm.
Brown had this one very fiery evangelist preacher leader, and he said very simply, if God says go, we must go. And it was very simple, but the way he said it, I think it truly ignited the audience, including myself. Is like it was so plain and obvious, sort of like actually God's go is compelling all over Scripture. And so again, the where the mission field, that could be a variety of places, but there's actually he doesn't really say don't go, unless he says don't go. Go. And I thought that was so compelling. And so I remember that distinctly. George Verwer with Operation Mobilization and him in the 90s as well, giving us a picture of the needs in the world. And I think he, among with others, opened my eyes up to the needs all around the world, not just where I am. And as a young, 20 something, you don't know much about the rest of the world. And so he brought that to light. It was very powerful. I would say more recently, as a speaker at Urbana, when I spoke or as a leader, seeing the image of, and if you're a leader listening to this, you'll get this and be so inspired. Sharing either sharing the gospel at Urbana, which we often have somebody share the gospel, but also calling this generation to missions.
Mm-hmm.
That's another talk. So I was able to do both of those, or have a seat at watching those two things happen and seeing students respond. So when you invite them to make a decision about giving their life to missions, one of those Urbanas, we had them hold these light sticks up in the air. When you see thousands of students holding up that light stick, signifying they're giving their life to global missions, there's no better feeling than that. I was so, I couldn't help it. I mean, I was like practically weeping because this generation all saying, I'm going to give my life to God's global mission. That was so powerful. So that was probably Urbana 12 and 15, seeing both those things happen.
Yeah, I'm curious, Tom. Urbana is so significant. When you announced that I was going to be the next Urbana director, I probably had 100 people reach out to me on LinkedIn, Facebook, telling me their Urbana story. Some went overseas. Some just felt like, wow, it changed my way of understanding Christianity and how I practice my faith and live out the person of Jesus and my relationship with him. But how did you learn about Urbana? Because it happens every 3 years. It's not the typical event where you come it's like not a concert, or hey, this is just a couple days. It's longer. It's 4 days. It's a commitment to come. How did you find out about it when you were?
Yeah,
So do you remember? Because I've tried to remember.
yeah.
How did I find out about it?
Multiple sources for me. So I went to an Asian church in Chicago, and there was a history of people going to Urbana from the church.
Mm-hmm.
And so we had church folks going. It was advertised through my home church as well. It was advertised in my college church. So the church I went to in Boston always brought a group of dozens and dozens from their college group to go. And then through my campus ministry, so my InterVarsity chapter as well. And so from multiple sources. So for me as a young person, it was like everyone was talking about it. But I think, and my hope is that, students are able to find out about it in similar ways today, that whether it's through their church and they find out, oh, wow, a group from my church is actually going. I want to go with my church group. Or with their campus ministry group, or, so that they find out from multiple places, because they do need that support. It's not just support from their parents, but I think sometimes it's really helpful to get support from your church as well.
Yeah, I was at a Christian university, Biola, and I think the best I can think about is that the missions department at Biola, of which I was a part of, had made some announcements about it, and that we brought a small group. That when it actually, I'm finding out it's a larger group than I realized, because I keep running into people like, remember we went to Urbana together? And I'm like, I don't remember that, but I guess we did. You were there too, but
Well, it was a lot of, I should say it was a lot of fun. I do remember it was a lot of fun, the journey there.
yes.
So ended up going primarily with my Boston group, and it was at the University of Illinois, Urbana, Illinois. So people flew to Chicago. We found a place to stay overnight. It was at someone's house. And then we took a bunch of vans, I guess. I mean, I don't know how we trekked together, right? And I have other friends that, took buses together, or they road tripped 15 hours in a car. So I do remember that journey. It was so fun to go together with my group.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was, one of the exciting things. And the fun thing is that so many of us are still connected to ministry that we were called to at Urbana, and are now, as we're coming into our mid 50s, and we're all like, wow, we're working together now and partnering with each other in other ways, and that's been really exciting to kind of see that connectivity over time. But I just want to hit that point for any leader that's listening. Don't assume that your students know what Urbana is, or that they're going to find out some other way. You may be the only way they are going to hear about it. And I don't know what made me think, after hearing about it, that's where I need to be. I tried to go back and relive that and understand it, especially now that I'm trying to get other young people to go. But there's something about people that we trust telling us about it and saying, you should really consider going to this. And, we put all of the past Urbana archives, promotion and recruitment materials and letters into AI, and said, what themes, come out of this? And one of the themes that came out, top of the list, was the word discernment. I that probably doesn't surprise you at all. Talk a little bit about discernment and how Urbana, its length, the nature of the program. How does discernment help? Because I think this is a generation that's really looking for direction, is really looking to discern what the future holds for them. Many of them, AI is disrupting their employment opportunities and where they thought they were going to be going. So there's a lot of discouragement as well. How would you describe that, Tom?
Yeah, I would say, two quick thoughts. One is, in terms of the need for discernment, we can't overstate how important it is for this generation, for Gen Z. They're getting inundated with tons of opportunities and messaging from so many places of what they could do with their lives. They're looking at peers and other people on social media at what they're doing with their lives, of course, really amazing things that everyone else is doing. And they're wondering, what am I supposed to do? And so how do they sift through all that noise and figure out what are they supposed to do? And it's so difficult. And of course, for a generation that thinks everything, they should have the answer to everything with a click of a button, it is really difficult, because, as we all know, discerning about life calling and what you're supposed to do is not a click of a button kind of thing. Yeah. So I do think the need is so great, which makes Urbana's role even more important, perhaps, than previous generations. Urbana's always been a discernment space. I do think you could say it from a spiritual side, right? There's some kind of anointing or purpose that God had for the vehicle, the man-made vehicle of Urbana since the beginning, since 1946, for generations, that Urbana's always been a place where a space where God's at work and God's calling his people. And so I do think there's something about that space, physical space as well. Like, it is a set aside physical space every 3 years. It's a set aside time. So, as you mentioned, 4 days. It's been 5 days before too. It's a long period of time, and I believe students need to unplug, be with others, be with the Lord for an extended period of time to be able to discern well, and that's what Urbana provides. And then I'd say the last thing why Urbana is so strategic on discernment is you also can touch, not just hear about all the opportunities to potentially serve, but you can touch it because of all the partner organizations that are there, missionaries who are there, people who have walked the path, mentors. And so in that one space, you've got time, place, you've got peers, you've got pastors and leaders that you've come with who can mentor and counsel you. And you've got missionaries and organizations there that you can talk to. All of that is just, I just say it's one-stop shopping for discernment. I mean, if you need to go to one place to figure it all out, it's the best place because everybody is there.
Yeah, I can't stress that enough because as I'm programming Urbana and our team is putting together all the different elements, one of the things that we're really focusing on is, it's real easy to look at it and go, okay, you're going to have thousands of, young people there. So it's this big rah event, but it's actually a really intimate experience as well.
Mm-hmm.
You get this great sense of epic nature in the big room kind of sessions together, but there's also this real intimate journey that every student is on as they're intimately walking with the Lord. And I think that's one of the unique qualities of Urbana is how it is experienced on multi levels as a young person going. So you mentioned 1946 and the origin of Urbana. You and I are kind of both fans of history of student involvement. Share a little bit about the beginning of Urbana in 1946 and how InterVarsity came to steward this event in North America.
Well, you're more the historian than me, actually, Mark. So I should have you say it. I'll say a couple thoughts.
Do it at the level you feel comfortable with.
I'll say a couple thoughts, and then I'd love for you to fill it in. Actually, I mean, I think at the time, 1940s, a growing sense of young people, college students, and so forth. Being inspired, kind of gaining a sense that we should be engaging with the world more, but needing to be equipped, wanting to organize themselves. And so you see at that time period, these different movements start to you could say, whether it's a variety of things in North American missions, but movements start to become organized. But what is possible just for college students only, like a targeted audience? And the name, I think, of the first Urbana, if I'm correct, was Convention for Missionary Advance, or something like that, right? The Convention for Global Missionary Advance, or something like that. And the thing is awesome because it was a convention to bring people who wanted to advance the cause of missions as young people, at the world. So I think that the thing I'll say about the history is that since that 1946, at least as far as I've seen, three main purposes have always been true. When you go to Urbana, you always see engage in the biblical basis for missions. You see, what does God's word say about missions? So that's totally important foundation. So it's not just rah. It's not just go because everyone else is going. There is a biblical basis, and that's why Bible exposition, Bible study, those things have been so key in every Urbana since the first one. The second is the opportunities and needs in the world. Like, you begin to see so you got biblical basis, but what are the needs now in the world? Like, you get a scope, and Urbana is great at always, I think, identifying what are those needs and opportunities now. And since 1946, I believe God's used Urbana to point to where are the needs and opportunities in the future. People have always come to an Urbana, especially if you're a leader, wanting to see, hey, what's on the horizon? Like, what's the future missions? And if you look at, as you know this, mission trends, Urbana's actually usually been like 10 years on the front end of it. So whether it's tent making or unreached peoples or whatever kind of focus of missions, like there was usually an Urbana like 10 years earlier that had already talked about it, So opportunities and needs. And then the third, as we said, my calling, like every Urbana's kind of had that kind of discernment, helped you figure out your calling. So yeah, that's what I think of when I think of the first one and the one since.
And how did InterVarsity come to steward it? Like, how has that played itself out?
Yeah, well, I mean, since the first one, we've been privileged. It's what I love about since the first one is that we've never seen it as an InterVarsity only event. It's not to advance the cause of InterVarsity, the first one was in Toronto, and actually, it's like InterVarsity leaders in Canada and in the U.S. were involved with that, but it was primarily hosted in Canada. And um, we've viewed it as a stewardship thing. So we're not trying to drive the cause of InterVarsity. It's for the church. It's for the Christian colleges. It's for other campus ministries. And so I view it as a privilege that we get to do that. And I often tell people we're spending InterVarsity resources. And it's not for InterVarsity. This is for other people. And
I think that's really important, because I think I was surprised when I looked at registration and realized that the majority of people that attend Urbana are not connected or affiliated with InterVarsity. So it really is a gift to the collegiate kind of space, to the church, to mission agencies. It's not a self-serving event.
That's right. Yeah. I mean, we have, I think in recent Urbanas, is it a third or less than a third from InterVarsity? So you've got in crew, navigators, other campus ministries, they send their people. Churches, lots and lots of churches that have nothing to do with InterVarsity, let's say. Christian colleges where we have no work, right? So yeah, totally. It's for everyone.
Yeah. We had so many students from Biola come when I was there, and Wheaton's planning on bringing 200 in the December, so that's pretty exciting. So there's a name, and we can kind of wrap up on this, but there's a name, David Howard, who was kind of known as being Mr. Urbana within the circles. Give us a little background on who David. I think I met him in 1990 when I was a part of this leadership thing. I believe that I met him just based on pictures that I saw, but I didn't know who I was meeting, and I didn't understand the significance of it, if in fact it was him. But you actually had a lot of interaction with him. Tell us a little bit about who he is.
Yeah, I think he's a Wheaton College grad, a phenomenal leader himself in missions. He in 1973 and 76 directed Urbana, the Urbana Missions Conference, was tapped to do it. And I believe both prior to that and then after that, he led mission agencies, was a leader in the missions world. I think he had a leadership role at Lausanne in 74 as well. And he led Latin American mission, I want to say, and some other missions, especially in working in South America or Central America. So missions leader, but what I appreciated, two things about him. One is he always talks about, like, he got his start in the missions world at an Urbana himself. He signed, he was there in 1946. He was at the first one.
Yeah, and he gave you his card, right?
Yeah.
And you gave it to me to kind of steward and watch over. But if you can take a look at that. That is David Howard's. That is a commitment card from the first Urbana in 1946. Wow.
Yeah. So he was faithful to it. He said I forgot the language they used then, but he pledged to give his life to cross-cultural missionary service or something whatnot, and he followed through on it. And the guy, he had done such amazing things in missions himself, but was so humble. And I was just caught by how he's always seen it a privilege and a fulfillment of his commitment at an Urbana. And so when I met him in the 2000s, when I was directing in 2012, he said to me, Tom, I don't know what challenges you're facing today because missions keeps changing and stuff, but I do know putting together any Urbana always has spiritual warfare. So I'm going to pray for you every single day. Wow. And I was like, wow, that's awesome. And we built a friendship over a few years. And he said, I've gone to every single Urbana where I've been in the United States. And he continued that even into his early 90s in age until he didn't make the one right before he passed away. But so anyways, Dave Howard is just a wonderful, humble leader, and his own life was shaped by an Urbana, which I appreciate.
Yeah, there's a great book written about him called What I Saw God Do. and it's his kind of reflection on his experience of being out there, seeing the gospel change and transform lives.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's interesting. You talked about Urbana being like 10 years ahead of where a lot of things are going, and I think part of that is because um, when we share what God is doing in the world right now in front of young people, that inspires an imagination that then, as they connect with God and where He starts leading them, it's not just about getting students to do the things that exist now. It's literally a David Howard getting an imagination for what could be.
That's right.
And
That's
I
right.
think about so many leaders that came to Urbana and then changed the trajectory of world mission. I was just at a conference last week on missional AI, talking about how artificial intelligence is helping us speed up the work as a tool for people doing work that's advancing the gospel in the world. And I don't have an imagination for that. You probably don't have an imagination for that. But this generation coming up, it is the air they breathe. And God is going to use that in ways we can't even begin to imagine.
Yeah. That's
And
right.
so,
That's right.
I want to encourage everybody, bring young people to Urbana, not because we want to fill seats, but because we want to engage their imagination with what God is doing. And we don't know where the next David Howard, the next Tom Lin, where they may be sitting in the seat as a 20-year-old. I'm thinking that I'm preparing Urbana for the director of the next Urbana. That's how I think about it, because I was a student there. I had no thought or imagination around leading the event. And here I am today, just like you were in 93. So
That's right.
amazing.
And I would say, with that, one of the books that Dave wrote is, of course, Student Power in World Missions. Student Power.
Yes.
And I think, I'm guessing anyone who's on the, listening today too, you believe it. There's, in this student generation, there is power, potential. If God can mobilize this generation for His purposes, it could change the world. And Dave believed that. He was inspired. That's why he gave his life's work to this, mobilizing young people too. And I think we believe that too. That
Mm-hmm.
the student power in global missions, if we can inspire this generation, if we can encourage them, support them, equip them, the world could change. So I'm inspired by that. And then I'd also say with Urbana, I mean, to give you credit, Mark, what you and your team are doing, I think every Urbana also discerns and researches to try to think ahead to what are the issues, what are the important issues, not just today, but that are coming. And so whether it's missional AI or something else, like now, obviously, InterVarsity has a great position being in close touch, in proximity and
Mm-hmm.
relationship with young 20-year-olds. So we kind of um, get a glimpse of what's to come, but we also do our research. And so I appreciate the research that Urbana does, so that any leader who's like, yeah, I wonder what's happening in missions today, what's going to happen in the future, they can come to Urbana and trust that, sort of the research has been done. The speakers selected, they represent a lot of what's to come, or they're seeing the future as well. So I appreciate that.
Yeah. Tom, any other just words of encouragement you give to any leaders that are considering coming to Urbana? And coming off of the pandemic, a lot of people have gotten out of this 3-year rhythm. So we're really re-engaging people that are kind of like going, whoa, yeah, I need to get back in the game with Urbana. We're seeing a lot of, especially Christian colleges and universities, realizing that Urbana is like helping supercharge their campus spiritual life again. What any words of encouragement there?
Yeah, I would say just two things. One is to remember, since Urbana just comes around once every 3 years. So if you have annual rhythms that you typically do, I totally get that. But to consider once every 3 years, or at least this year, this December 28th, to try this different rhythm just for this year, because it only comes around every 3 years right now. So, and then Urbana is a catalytic event. I would say, like, it can catalyze your group. And so, or if you're a student that's listening to this, it can catalyze your peer group or your campus fellowship. So to bring a group to a catalytic event that actually, in just those 4 or 5 days, I consider that like over a year's worth of discipleship. I mean, like if you're in ministry, like a year's worth of ministry packed in just that 5-day, 4-day experience together. So it's totally worth the investment if you view it as a catalytic event. It's not just, another, Christian thing you attend. It's really a catalytic event for discipleship and mission. And I think it's worth that. If you use that lens, that'll be worth the investment. And because it will take some investment to share with people what Urbana is, get them registered, and then get them there.
Yeah, we encourage people, don't wait to the fall to decide to come. The more time that you do to share that with students, get it on their calendars and radars as they're planning and preparing for Christmas. I was just talking with a woman from the Middle East today who has 3 sons that are attending school here in the U.S. And for Christmas, she already gave them Urbana as a Christmas present.
Oh,
and I thought, wow, that's a mom that's thinking ahead,
yeah.
right?
Oh, yeah.
So that was pretty exciting. So, well, hey, Tom, thanks for being with us today.
Yeah, well, thanks, Mark. Appreciate all that you do, and looking forward to seeing you and everyone else at Urbana.
I love working with Tom Lin. In fact, Tom and my dad were on a board, the Wycliffe board, U.S. board. I never knew Tom before I accepted this role, but I knew so much about his reputation beforehand.
Yeah.
And so really, he was one of the reasons I wanted to do the Urbana project, was knowing that I'd be working with him because he's such a great leader in person. Okay, I promised that I had something cool to show everybody.
Yes.
And that Tom and I talked about David Howard. And David Howard wrote this book, Student Power in World Missions. And this book, I read it when I was a student at Biola. And then Tom gave it to me when they offered me the Urbana position, and I read it. And then I read it after I'd been in the position for about 3 months. And let me tell you, reading it after I was in the position gave me a whole new, I read it with a whole different lens, and it meant something completely different to me. And it really was a part of shaping kind of how I wanted to, design Urbana this year. But Tom gave me something to steward, and it is this. David Howard, he directed 2 Urbana conferences and did a slew of other wonderful things in missions around the world. But this is his decision card from the first Urbana in Toronto in 1946. Isn't that cool?
What does it say? I'm just curious.
Yeah, it says, "My missionary purpose. Knowing that Jesus Christ has saved me from my sin, that all men without Christ are lost, and there is no other name by which men may be saved, that God's command is, go ye into all the world, that the labors are few in the foreign field, and believing it is God's will for me, I purpose to be a foreign missionary, and will plan accordingly. Until he leads me to the field, I will support the work by my prayers, gifts, and witnessing. If the Lord's later leading should direct me into other service, I will seek to give foreign missions its rightful place of prominence in my ministry." And that was the Student Foreign Missions Fellowship, 64 East Lake, Chicago. And that was David Howard. So pretty cool, huh?
That's really cool.
Yeah, going all the way back to 1946.
I love that. That's beautiful.
Yeah. And it's interesting because missions in 1946 obviously looked a lot different than it does today. What that meant, the challenges of travel. I mean, I think about just how urbanization has changed missions. You can get dropped into just about any city, and if you've got a cell phone and a credit card, you kind of know what to do and can get around.
Yeah.
So that's changed so much versus even getting to some of these locations in areas was really, really challenging, that now, have airports and regular travel and cell phone coverage and things of that nature. So to just think about that change. But what that does is creates a new imagination around what missions can be into the future. And I think with AI, globalization, Gen Z, I think that this is an Urbana of imagination. I think as I've looked at past Urbanas, some of them are about like, hey, here are the spots we need to fill to do mission work. And then sometimes there are years where it's like, we need imagination around how to do what's coming. And I
Right.
think this is going to be that kind of an Urbana year. So,
Yeah. I was talking to one of my coworkers yesterday who is probably 20 years older than me, and he was just saying it's not that that the levels of change have like changed over time as far as technology technology and advancement and whatnot. It's not that it's actually going up any further now than it has in the past, but it's just the distance between or the time between those levels of advancement has shrunk so much in recent years. So whereas at one point it was like a generation of change, now it's like 2 years of change. So we're seeing everything change at such a rapid pace. I think that makes me excited and hopeful for Urbana because, like you're saying, there's a lot to be imagined there in just how
mhm.
much globalization is connecting us as never before. And you have new tools like AI popping up. Like 3 years ago at the last Urbana, I don't think AI was really at the forefront of everyone's minds. And now it most definitely is. I know you were just at a conference for missional AI and
Mhm,
thinking
mhm.
about how does artificial intelligence impact the way that we share the gospel. I think these questions are really key as we're looking at a world that's changing so much faster than we've ever seen before.
Well, yeah, I mean, we have students that are graduating out of college going, my job doesn't exist anymore. Like what I thought I was
Yeah.
going to do when I graduated isn't even a job. And so that's that rapid change is it's kind of it's scary, but it's also kind of invigorating. Like what does God have
Hmm.
next and what can we imagine? One of the cool things that missional AI thing too was um everybody wants AI to be good, but
Yeah.
but where does that good come from? What is that definition?
Hmm.
And so there's a real interesting common ground missional element with the technologists. They're Christians that are in this process of engineering and setting up the ethics and the boundaries of what AI can do and shouldn't do, because it can manifest our sin as much as
Yeah.
it manifests the best parts of humanity, right? So
Right.
there's a huge theological conversation happening amongst these technologists as they're going, what does it mean to be human in this moment?
Hmm.
And I think it's actually kind of pushing us to understand who God is more. And I think that's going to change the way we do missions in a weird way. I
Right.
really believe it will. And I'm excited for the conversations and the engagements that we're going to have at Urbana, because Urbana is not about telling you what to do. It's about you responding to what God is
Mm.
doing. And I'm excited for people just to come and hear these stories and experience this together. And Tom's obviously been a significant part of making all that happen over the
Hmm.
last 10 years. One other interesting thing think that's, from Tom, InterVarsity stewards and hosts this event, but
Hmm.
it's, only made up about 25% of InterVarsity people. And
Yeah. Right.
so it is a larger event for the broader collegiate and young adult community. And I just really
Hmm.
want to make sure that we make that known that even though InterVarsity hosts this isn't an InterVarsity event.
Yeah.
For InterVarsity, it's for the broader community.
There's a reason why it's called Urbana and not the InterVarsity Conference.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, 100%. And so kind of excited about that. Any other thoughts from you, Phoebe, on the conversation with Tom?
Yeah, I was just thinking, like, going back to AI, I think it's really tempting to start as Christians by thinking about AI, start with the AI and say, how can we change the AI or use the AI to do good in the world? I think the question we really need to be answering is how can we listen to God in a way that we can follow the Spirit first
Hmm.
before we even think about AI? I think we have to start by listening to God. And I think I loved what Tom was saying about just unplugging for 5 days at Urbana. Like there is something about just being present and listening to what the Spirit is leading you towards. That's really key in starting to answer these bigger questions. And after just anchoring yourself in God's truth, I think only then can you approach these larger questions of what am I doing in the world or what are the problems I want to solve? Like those questions have to be answered after you just spend time in solitude or in community with others who know you well, who are supporting you in that kind of just discernment and listening process. And so I love how Urbana is focused on that, and not just starting with AI or starting with the change and talking about that first, but instead coming in and being like, hey, let's worship together. Let's study the Bible together. Let's anchor ourselves and root ourselves first before we approach these bigger questions. So yeah, that's one thing that I just really appreciated Tom making that point.
Yeah, boy, that's a great thought to end on today. So anyway, well, thanks, Phoebe, for being with me again today. And I hope that your summer's off to a good start. And I will look forward to seeing you all in another Urbana podcast.